G'day Internet, Max right here, and a really fun video today. Peter Schiff, we've had a back and forth a few times here. Last year we had a little bit of back and forth talking about Bitcoin and whether or not it satisfies regression theorem, whether or not it's actually a commodity. And I've seen him just pop up a few times lately. I've been following him for years. I think he's great. But he was on Pomp a few times, and he was asked the question, what would it take to get you to buy Bitcoin? And he's just said, there's nothing. And I call bullshit on that answer. I think right here in this video, you're absolutely going to see a time, and I think Peter will admit it to himself as well, that there is a situation in which he will buy Bitcoin. And I think we'll have a shot at it. Let's see if we can get him across the line in this video. So I think it's going to be fun. So let's get to it. So to understand Peter's, actually I'll go a little bit of history here. I made a video, let's see, you can't see that yet. I made a video here in April of 2020, and it went through, it rated money on like 16 different things. It was durable, divisible, fungible, convenient, a whole bunch of things, right? And it compared gold and Bitcoin and gave them a scorecard to it. Now, Peter actually responded to this video. He said, well-made video, and you made a lot of good points, but you failed to point out that Bitcoin gets an F in intrinsic value, which means it fails as money. So, yeah, really good point. And this is consistent. This is still his argument today. I heard him make it just the other day. It's like it fails this test of is it a commodity? Does it have intrinsic value? So let's go and understand where that's coming from. So Peter is an Austrian economist, which actually, let me see if I can get the font bigger on this, make it a little easier for you all. Peter is an Austrian economist, and Ludwig von Mises was an Austrian too. Who created the school, I believe. And he first posed this concept called the Regression Theorem in his book, The Theory of Money and Credit. He came up with this in 1912. That's important. And it states the value of money can be traced back, regressed. Okay, so we're all using it as money today. Well, yesterday, did it have any value? Okay, but we're still using it as money. Go back. If you keep regressing, going back to a time when it wasn't used as money, is there something that we can hang our hat on to say that it was a value beforehand, was a commodity? And it basically says it has to be used, it has to be traced back to a time when it had value as a commodity. If it doesn't have that, it fails regression theorem and it can't be used as money. So that's a critically important thing. It has to be a commodity. Now, this is important. In 1912, pre-robotics, pre-computers, pre-automation, he's basically saying that, Mises looked back through history and saw that everything we've used as money, tobacco and seashells and cigarettes and gold and silver and all the things, at all times, they had value as a commodity. And his theorem fit perfectly. But he also lived at a time when it was impossible to conceive of a service being done by computers. Why is that important? Well, if a service, at the time, services are only provided by human beings. It's impossible for them to be fungible. It is impossible for them to be durable. It is impossible for them a service offered by a human to meet a whole bunch of criteria that is required for money. However, again, this is 1912. Since the invention of robotics, since the invention of computers and AI and all the things, it is perfectly possible to have a service that is provided that is fungible, is durable, and all of those things. And we don't even need to look at Bitcoin to figure this out. This has happened quite a bit. And I'll give you another example. There are several examples of African nations where the locals use credits for the cell phone services provided in that country as money. The country went into hyperinflation, the local currency was worthless, and people started using phone credits. They'd go to the grocery store and look, hey, I've got 20 minutes worth of phone calls on this network. I'll give you 7 minutes to buy the groceries. And they were paying for groceries with minutes on the cell phone. So what that is a service. Now, it's possible, this is only possible post-automation, computerization, digitization, because the cell phone service, your 7 minutes that you're going to use on this, using the cell phone network, it is fungible, it is durable, it is divisible, it is all of these things. It is all the things that money can be. And so while Mises statement and theory was correct and accurate in 1912, I think it's very obvious that it has to be updated. It has to be updated to include goods and services, right? It is not just commodity. It is just something that has value. Anything that has value, and it could be a service if it meets the other criteria, fungible, durable, etc. If it meets all of those criteria, then a service can also satisfy regression theorem. All right, I want to leave that there, but we're going to come back to it. I want to jump to something else. The next thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about gold here. And I want to talk about the breakup of who uses gold. Now, at present, gold is used by 3% of gold owners use it for industry, right? Something in the order of 42%, is it? I got it written down here. 42%. 42% of people use it as jewelry, and 55% of people use it as money, as a store of value, right? And what's very interesting about this is that the spectrum of people that are using it ebbs and flows over time. So for example, it's possible to make way less people use this as a store of value, use gold as a store of value. For example, if the government outlaws it, says anyone caught with their gold, they have to turn it to the government or we're going to confiscate it, a lot less people, they're going to sell their gold, give it to them, and they're not using it as gold anymore. You could also say, you could also go the other way. What if someone came up with a very cool invention where you could wrap your precious metal coins, your gold coins, in some cool new polymer so that when it went through X-ray machines at the airport, it was invisible and no one checked your bags? Wouldn't more people start using gold as money? So that 55% would go up and the jewelry and industrial uses might go down, right? What about this one? What if someone invents a teleportation device? And you can put your gram of gold in your little teleportation device sitting here at your computer, and you can send your gold across to Amazon and buy your goods and services with it. How many more people would use gold as money in that situation? I think in that environment, you would see gold blow up to like 90% plus people are using gold as a store of value and as money, and only a handful of people, because with all that people using it, the price would shoot up. Using it as an industrial good wouldn't make sense anymore. They'd find some other equivalent because gold would just be too expensive to use in the industrial uses, right? People as jewelry, so much less people would be able to afford the jewelry. You might see Bitcoin approach 90%, 95%, sorry, not Bitcoin, gold. You might see gold approach 95%, 99% people using it as money. But it's very interesting to note that it would still satisfy regression theorem because it was used as a commodity, right? So it's very, very important to understand that regression theorem is not a spectrum. You can't say that, oh, look, there's so many people using gold as industrial use and store of value, industrial use and jewelry. It's only a little bit more than half use it as money, and so that's some kind of proof of regression theorem. It's not. It's just, as it stands today, with how good gold is useful as money and how good gold is as this, prices fluctuate, people's interest and demand goes in different directions, and that's the way it lies now. But it's not all that way. Regression theorem is binary. It either satisfies it or it doesn't. And the better the commodity or service is at satisfying people's demands for money compared to its use as something else will dictate how many people use it for one purpose or the other. Right? So therefore, if something came along like this, which is, as you read, so just a point here about that video, well-made video, you make a lot of great points, but Bitcoin gets an F in intrinsic value. Let's just suspend our belief for a moment, and let's just be intellectually playful, and let's say that Bitcoin satisfied regression theorem. Let's just do that. Just be intellectually playful. We'll come back to the question of whether or not it satisfies regression theorem in a minute. Let's ask the question, if it did satisfy regression theorem, how many people do we think would be using it as money, and how many people would be using it for its other services, right? So let's take a look at this thing. We've got durable, divisible, fungible. You just can scan your eyes down there and read this in your own time. Look at all these A's, A pluses, there's a D minus. And this is something that Peter's already agreed with, by the way. gold, B's, C's, A minuses, B pluses, C's, F's, B's, F's, D's, F's, right? Bitcoin is clearly, if it satisfied regression theorem, is a vastly superior money than gold. So we would expect way more people to be using Bitcoin as money, as a store of value, than gold. All right, I want to point that out because some people think, but wow, who's using it as a service? Who's using it as a store of value? What's the breakup? Well, we would expect this thing, Bitcoin, if it satisfied regression theorem, it is so freaking good at store of value and being money, which, by the way, the corruption of money is the single greatest issue facing humanity at the moment. It is the single biggest problem civilization needs to solve. So this thing comes along, and we're still in the hypothetical. If regression theorem is satisfied, then this thing, which solves the greatest problem in the history of the world, and does it better than anything else that's come before it, and by a lot, right, then you would expect that 99% of people would be using this thing as money and not as the service. That is just what you would expect. You would be foolish to expect anything else, right? And pretty obviously, this isn't some magic trick. We can all see where this is going. That is exactly what we see. Bitcoin, 99% of people, or vast majority of people, are using it as a store of value. But that's exactly what you would expect. So let's leave the hypothetical now. Let's go back to regression theorem. We've established that, I think, let me know in the comments below what you think. Have we satisfied that the regression theorem needs to be expanded to include services? I think that's critically important. Mises could not possibly have anticipated that in 1912. And now that we're here in 2021, we understand that services can be fungible, durable, all the things, right? So it's time for regression theorem to be expanded to include services that also meet the other criteria of money. Okay, next, the question becomes, is there some situation where Bitcoin performs a service outside of being a store of value? Is there any situation where it has some value as a service and not as a store of value, right? We're looking for that 1%. We know 99% of people are using it as a store of value. We're looking for the 1%. All right, I'll get to a better answer in a minute, but I think a little common sense one that I think is worth mentioning. There is a huge, huge market for people to borrow Bitcoin, knowing they have to pay back Bitcoin. So they're not exposed to the price at all. And they are paying for the privilege. They pay an interest rate to borrow Bitcoin, right? When they have it, all they do is, it is of use to them. They're not making money. If the price goes up, price goes down, that's irrelevant to them. They've borrowed the Bitcoin for its use, you see? And then they've got to pay it back. So they get no benefit from the price going up. So they're not speculators, they're not investors, they're not store of value people. They're borrowing it, and they have to pay back in Bitcoin. So common sense tells us there has to be a use there somewhere, because they're paying money for the privilege of using it. Okay, I think that's worthy of mention because it's common sense. But now let's see if we can go and satisfy regression theorem more completely. So first of all, I want to give Peter a specific example in which I believe he would use Bitcoin. When he's asked the question, I've heard him get asked the question so many times, what would it take for you to buy Bitcoin? And his answer is nothing. I have no interest in it. I'd say, I disagree. Let me give you a hypothetical that I believe you would take Bitcoin. And just so many people don't understand how to do hypotheticals. I don't think Peter's this guy, he's too smart to do this, but some people, when you give them hypotheticals, they spend all their time trying to escape the hypothetical and give some bullshit answer over here. Listen, if my hypothetical has some holes in it, be intellectually playful and help me tighten up the hypothetical so that you have to answer with the choices A or B that I present. Don't come up with some stupid left field answer and then negate the point. That doesn't negate the point. That makes you an idiot if you were to do that. All right, here's the hypothetical. So Peter, you're living on Puerto Rico, okay? And dollar's going into hyperinflation. Government's doing all kind of crackdown. There's more COVID nonsense. They're saying, okay, everyone's got to stay in their place. No one's allowed to, there's no flights, there's no boat trips. You can't leave the ports. So you can't carry any wealth. You can go, but you can't carry any wealth. But listen, because we're going to hyperinflation, we have to take all the gold off of people. They even say we have to take all the Bitcoin off of people. We have to take all the Bitcoin off of people. We have to protect the dollar against the gold and Bitcoin speculators, something they always do, and we have to confiscate all of it. That's what the American government says. Now, the people can leave, I should say. The people can leave, but they're going to be checking at the airports. Okay, you're sitting there. You're sitting there on your pile of gold that you have in Puerto Rico. You probably don't have any there, but let's assume you do. It's a hypothetical. All right? And you want to get you want to leave this regime that has just cracked down on gold and Bitcoin, so they're going to arrest anyone who holds it. You need to get the hell out of Dodge. But your gold, will be found at the airports by metal detectors, and they're searching everybody, etc., etc. Now, there is a flourishing black market on Puerto Rico and pretty much every country in the world, right? And you can go and you can trade your gold for Bitcoin. Now, you don't like Bitcoin. Bitcoin doesn't have a store of value in your opinion. It's and you think it's going to zero at some point in the future. But it's only got to last, not go to zero, until you can hop on the plane, fly to another country where you can race to another exchange or a black market where you can trade your Bitcoin back for your precious gold. In that scenario where your choices are leave Puerto Rico, leave your gold behind, could get robbed, stolen, whatever, even if you go and bury it somewhere, or get it confiscated, or transfer it to Bitcoin, fly somewhere, immediately transfer it back. Now, Bitcoin's had a price every single day for the last 10 years. This should give you a certain amount of confidence that, is it going to have a price by tomorrow? I mean, reasonably good chance. It doesn't matter, and all it needs to do is to perform this service of you, of transferring proof of ownership of this coin. I submit to you, Peter, that in that scenario, even you would use Bitcoin. Again, please don't be the kind of person who says, I'd bury it in the woods and come back and get it 10 years. I mean, that's just childish stupidity. Don't escape the hypothetical, play in the hypothetical. And if there's a gap in my hypothetical, you'd be better than me and tighten the hypothetical up. So you have to choose one of the choices. All right? And I think even you will concede that you would use it in that time. But, okay, that was a little bit of an obscure one, but I wanted to make one personally for you. Let's take a look. Let's say you're a drug dealer. You're you're hammering away on your corner in gunfights every day, protecting your turf, so you're the only one who can sell on this corner. And all of a sudden you realize, hey, there's the dark web out there. And I can sell to an international audience my drugs. There'll be no guns, no violence, no turf wars. I won't have to be in any of that shit anymore. The only thing I need to do is accept this digital token online called Bitcoin. I don't believe in Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin's a joke. I just want to sell my good drugs here for gold. But gold can't be transported, and I can't get a merchant account, and I have no other options available to me. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to accept Bitcoin. So in order to accept the Bitcoin, that means the buyer had to go and get some. Had to do something to get it. Yes? He then sends it to me. I send him the drugs. I liquidate my Bitcoin. I go and get my gold. I feel paid. Again, the people needed Bitcoin. Bitcoin provided a service. It transferred value across the world. Now, it's critically important is that you could have got the Bitcoin one of two ways. You could have just mined it. That would have cost you time, electricity, and expertise. Or you could have bought it off somebody else. And hey presto, at some price, it is cheaper to buy it off somebody else than to mine it yourself. At that point, the token Bitcoin, much like the minutes of the cell phone usage in Africa, is access to the network that so many people would use. I came up with a hypothetical where I think you would use it. There's no doubt about the dark web. I mean, we all know the history of Silk Road, and we know how many people, how much value was transferred on that network, because the service that Bitcoin provides is what satisfies the regression theorem. I understand that in order to get there, we had to go and tweak the great work of Mises, but I think you agree with the tweak, right? Because it was just written in 1912. It just needs to be updated. It should be goods or services, commodities or services. And I'm sure that you can come up with millions of examples now that I've opened this door, hopefully in your mind, that there's just so many services that can be used. So a self-driving car. We could have minutes on the self-driving car for example, that could be used as money. But just automation, that kind of gives us, it makes it available to us, okay? And so that means services needed to be added. And I've just demonstrated there how, well, and we can look back at history and understand that through the dark web, Bitcoin provides a service that no one else could, all right? And so therefore it had a value. But because it was also so good at money, the vast majority of people who use Bitcoin today, they use it as a store of value. They use it as, they understand that people are going to be using this as money in the future. They're speculating on it. All of that is true. It doesn't change the fact that regression theorem has been satisfied. So, all right, I am going to leave it there. Let me know in the thoughts book, in the comments below. I want to know whether or not you agree with it, disagree with it. But an even more fun question: if Peter was to not agree with it, if he was to say, it's not, I don't buy this argument for one reason or another, where do you think it falls down? All right, let me make it super easy for you. So here are the points that we've covered. There was regression theorem is binary. It's either true or false. It's not a spectrum. It's not gold satisfy regression theorem more than Bitcoin because it has more industrial use. It's a binary, true or false. Okay, point number 2. Regression theorem needs to be updated to include services and not just commodities. My hypothetical, would Peter use Bitcoin to transfer his wealth? Does he see how others have used the service of Bitcoin to transfer wealth, like the dark web drug dealers? And finally, with their updated definition of regression theorem, do you agree that Bitcoin meets the definition? If Peter was to disagree, where in that chain of logic do you think he would find fault? All right, let me know in the comments below. Hopefully, and by the way, do me a favor, send this to Peter on Twitter, and let's see if we can get a conversation going. If you want to come on and discuss it, I would absolutely love that, of course. Okay, guys, take care. I'll see you soon.